Claire moved through the night shift like a shadow drifting between dim lights and echoing footsteps. The hospital was too quiet for a Tuesday, and her gut told her something was wrong. The kind of quiet that presses against your ribs and makes you feel like you are being watched. She passed the front desk, nodded to the dozing receptionist, then turned down the west wing, and that was when she saw him sitting slumped against the vending machine, halfway hidden in shadows, dressed like a construction worker but too stiff to alert. His shoulders hunched, his breathing shallow, one hand gripping his side, the other holding a crumpled envelope. His boots were scuffed, military grade, old, not new, not decorative, not casual. Her steps slowed, without thinking, and she felt that old tension rise behind her ribs. The same tension she felt when her brother came back from the war. Quiet, cold, distant, like something had followed him back. She approached with caution. Something about the man screamed danger, not the kind that threatened her life, but the kind that carried the weight of things unseen. She knelt beside him, asked if he needed help, and the man looked up slowly, his eyes bloodshot, hollow and sharp like glass. Those eyes were not from around here. Those were eyes that had seen dust and fire and things. No one should witness. His voice came out cracked like gravel being scraped off metal. He said, "I need help," and then he went silent again. His hand shifted just enough to show blood seeping through his shirt, not fresh, not old, the kind that had been ignored too long. She glanced around. No one in the hallway, no footsteps, no cameras in this wing at night. She said, "Come with me," and helped him up. He staggered and leaned, into her heavier than he looked, as if every muscle in his body was seconds from collapsing. She led him through the back door of physical therapy, where the cameras had been dead for weeks. No one used the space after midnight, except interns looking, to hide or sleep. She closed the door behind them, flicked on the dim light, and told him, "Sit." He obeyed. Wordless breathing, shallow, his fingers twitching. Claire moved to the cabinet, pulled out gauze, antiseptic, a needle and thread, and gloves all without. Thinking, her mind racing louder than her pulse, she returned to him, peeled back his jacket, and froze. The wound was jagged, sharp, and deep-stitched with field thread, uneven, clumsy, fast. The kind of stitch someone does while running, bleeding, hiding. She cleaned it gently, his skin twitching at every touch, and he never said a word until she asked, "What happened to you?" He whispered back low and dry like a man near the edge of passing out. "I wasn't supposed to come back." She felt her throat close, slightly. "What do you mean?" she asked, and he just dropped the envelope from his hand. It landed beside her shoe and slid open. Inside were two things, a photo and a folded page. The photo showed a desert compound burned flat, cratered to ash, the kind of image that made her stomach turn. It had been labeled classified in red. Bold letters across the top. The paper had numbers and codes she could not understand. Symbols, maps, and coordinates. He said, "They think I died with the rest. Extraction failed. Upburned assets, erased team gone, and now they're coming to finish it." Claire froze halfway through the stitch. Her hand trembling for the first time, she looked up into his eyes and saw no lie. Just emptiness and pain and warning. She finished the stitch fast, cleaned the blood, taped the wound, and then he looked at her again. His hand grabbed her wrist and his voice lowered more. "If they find me, they will find you, and they will not ask questions." She stared at him, breathing fast, her heart thudding behind her ribs like a drum being struck with fury. "You should be in a real hospital," she said, and he laughed a dry, broken sound and said that would be the end of both of us. Claire sat back against the wall, her head spinning. The rules were clear report. Every wound, every contact, every irregularity. And yet here she was, with a bleeding stranger who had just told her he was supposed to be dead, and that someone wanted to keep it that way. Her hands were stained with his blood. Her fingerprints on everything. No matter what happened next. She had crossed the line, and she knew there was no going back now. The silence outside the door seemed louder now, and she could swear the air was different, heavier, like something had already begun to move in the darkness. The room was heavy with silence, but it was not the peaceful kind. It was the kind that coils around the spine and waits to strike. Claire sat against the cold wall, staring at the stranger she had just stitched up. His breathing had slowed, but his eyes remained open, watching not just her, but the corners, the ceiling, the air itself, like he expected something to break through at any second. She whispered your name. What do I call you? He looked at her blank for a second, then said, call me Cole. It was probably a lie, but it was something better than silence. She stood slowly, her legs stiff from crouching too long. Her brain screamed for order, logic control, but nothing about tonight could be explained or understood. She went to the sink, washed the blood from her hands, watching the red swirl down the drain, and it struck her. This was real, not a dream, not a story. This man was flesh and broken and hunted, and now she was part of whatever shadow he was dragging behind him. Cole shifted. His weight, his hand still pressed against his ribs. He said, they know I survived. I left a trace, didn't mean to. But I was dying. And there was no time. I called in a ghost line. One of ours thought it was secure. I was wrong. Claire turned to face him. Who are they? She asked. He hesitated, looked her dead in the eyes and said, not everyone who wears the flag is loyal to it. She did not understand, but she knew enough to stop asking. She reached for the small med kit to check his vitals again, but before she touched him, a faint click sounded from the hallway and her blood froze. It was the soft kind of sound that hospital doors make when someone leans on them, when someone tries the handle. She turned off the light. Instantly, the room dropped into shadow. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. Cole sat up straighter despite the pain, whispered, get down! She slid beside him, crouched low, barely breathing. The handle twisted slowly, then stopped. Whoever it was didn't try to force entry, just lingered, then stepped away. She waited 5 full minutes before whispering, maybe a nurse, maybe security. Cole shook his head, too quiet, too long. They are checking the blind spots, the ones without cameras. Claire felt her stomach drop. No one should know the cameras in this wing were dead except maintenance, and that wasn't public knowledge, she whispered. How do they know? He did not answer, just looked toward the ceiling and said, if they are here, it means they already tracked the signal and your system. Picked it up when you took my vitals. Claire clenched her fists, her brain spinning if someone was in the system. Then her name, her logins. Her actions were already compromised. She had stitched him. She had moved him. She had not logged any of it, and that silence was a scream to anyone watching. She reached for her phone, but Cole grabbed her wrist again. No calls. He said no messages, no digital anything. Claire looked at him, wild-eyed, then hissed, what do we do now? He replied, we move. We get out of the building, and we disappear. She wanted to laugh. She wanted to scream. Do you think I can just leave a hospital in the middle of shift with a bleeding stranger and not get flagged? But something in his voice, something in his eyes made her pause. He was not guessing he was surviving. He was doing what he had done for months, maybe years. She helped him up. He staggered but stayed on his feet barely. They moved to the back of the room toward the utility closet. Behind it was an old laundry chute. No longer in use, sealed on most floors, but not on this one. Claire had hidden in it once during a drill back when she was new and scared and not ready for the weight of the world. She opened it, helped him inside. First, then followed the metal walls. Scraped her elbows as they slid down, dropped into the linen room 1 floor below, empty, quiet. No staff at this hour. They stumbled into the corridor, lights flickering again, and she felt every shadow watch them as they passed. She heard a voice up, ahead speaking into a radio, not hospital security, not staff, something colder, more controlled. She pulled Cole into a side room, shut the door quietly, her back against the wall, her breath shaking. She looked at the man beside her and whispered, what, exactly, did you bring to my door? Cole leaned his head back against the wall, blood still soaking his shirt, and said, The kind of truth they send soldiers to bury. Claire looked around the room, the flickering light, the dust, the silence, and knew deep. In her bones they were not safe, not yet, not even close. Claire stared at the door like it was about to vanish, like it was made of paper, and the people outside could walk through it if they wanted to. Her heart pounded in her chest, louder than the buzz of the dying fluorescent bulb overhead. Cole was, breathing in shallow bursts, his eyes closed, his lips moving silently like he was repeating a prayer or a memory, or maybe a frequency. She whispered to him, "We can stay here." His eyes opened instantly sharp and alert, and he said, "Then we move. But not before you understand what is inside that envelope." Claire hesitated, then pulled it from her coat pocket, unfolded the single page that was soaked in old blood and sweat, and something else, something that made her skin crawl. It was not written. In English, at least not entirely. Numbers, symbols, acronyms, half-shredded coordinates that meant nothing to her, but everything to someone who knew how to read it. She looked at Cole and asked, "What is this?" He replied, "The reason they will not stop until we disappear." Claire knelt beside him, still gripping the page. She could feel its weight, like it was heavier than paper, like it carried something that should have stayed buried. Cole continued that compound in the photo was supposed to be a ghost, a place that didn't exist where operations were carried out, without oversight, without names, without accountability. It was never meant to be on any record, never meant to be known even by us. But something went wrong. A deal collapsed, a prisoner escaped, a name got out that should have stayed locked, and they torched it. They erased everyone and everything except me. Claire looked at him. "Why you?" he said. "Because I was late to the exfil, and when I got there it was already burning. I saw what they did, and instead of following orders I ran. I thought I could vanish. I thought they would believe I was ash like the rest. But they were smarter than I gave them credit for. And now I have something they thought was gone forever. A copy of the call logs, the encrypted chain of command, the black site authorizations all embedded in that page you are holding." Claire stared at the paper, then folded it carefully and stuffed it into her boot. Not her coat, her boot. The kind of decision someone makes when they stop thinking like a nurse and start thinking like someone who wants to live. She helped Cole stand again, his weight heavier than before. He was weakening blood loss pain, maybe something worse. They moved through the old linen wing. Every corner felt like a trigger, every hallway a trap. Claire felt the cameras above them, even the broken ones watching, waiting as if they could still see through dead eyes. Cole whispered, "We need an exit that doesn't show up on schematics." Claire nodded, her mind racing, then remembered the old generator hallway, down by the incinerator, used only during storms and power tests, and most importantly, locked from inside. She guided him through stairwells and broken passages, her badge useless here, her nerves fraying at every turn, and when they finally reached the rusted door, she knocked twice, paused, then 3 more times, just like the janitor had shown her 2 years ago during a blackout drill, a code meant to keep staff safe during riots, power cuts, or worse. The door clicked open, but no one was on the other side, just darkness and the hum of old machinery. Cole stepped inside and she followed, sealing the door behind them. The hallway was warm like a furnace choked with the scent of oil and heat and dust. She leaned Cole against the wall and whispered, "We can't keep running like this." He looked at her eyes, glassy with exhaustion, and said, "Then we stop running and start planning." She watched him sink slowly to the floor, his breath shallow but steady. He needed rest. He needed meds. He needed help. She could not give without putting more targets on both their backs, but she could not leave him either, not after everything. Not after the look in his eyes when he handed her that envelope. She crouched beside him, heart still hammering, and whispered, "How long do we have before they realize we are off-grid?" He said, "Not long. If they tracked my beacon, they will ping the hospital logs, then trace your badge, and if they know, your face. They will come to your home. They will come to your family and make it look like an accident." Claire froze, her mind flashing to her little apartment, to the photos on her fridge, to the last call she made to her father. She whispered, "What do we do now?" And Cole opened his eyes and said, "We send a signal to someone who still remembers who we were before the world turned its back." Claire did not understand, but she nodded anyway, because at that moment, there was no other road left to walk. The generator hallway groaned around them, the metal piping overhead shuddering with the pulse of the old machines, each thump like a distant drumbeat. Counting down to something, Claire sat beside Cole, his back against the wall, his shirt soaked in blood and sweat, and something darker, something older. He had stopped shaking, which worried her more than the shaking had. His skin was cold, and his breaths came in uneven patterns, like he was timing each one, like he was trying not to use up. "Whatever was left," she whispered softly. "Who do we call?" And he said, "Not who." "Where?" She watched him reach into the lining of his jacket, his fingers trembling until they closed around a worn patch of canvas. He pulled it free, unwrapped it with slow, methodical care, revealing a broken piece of a military radio, the kind that should have been phased out a decade ago. He whispered they stopped using this frequency years ago. Said it was compromised, but we kept it alive, those of us who knew it. Was never the frequency that failed, only the men who controlled it. Claire leaned closer, watching him piece the device together, with parts hidden in his boot and waistband, and even the inside of his belt, as if he had planned for this kind of moment. As if he had known one day he would be bleeding in the dark, praying someone would still be listening. He twisted a dial, then pressed a button and spoke into it. A string of numbers followed by a name. Cassandra, 01 Firewatch, sleeping the silence. That followed stretched longer than she liked, the device. Crackled once, then again. Then a voice replied, "Male rough, gravelly and cautious. State last sunrise." Cole answered, "Midnight, Gulf 7 November. And the line went dead again. Claire looked at him, her heart frozen. "What does that mean?" He said, "It means they are verifying that I am who I say I am, and that I am not dead. Yet." Claire stood, moved to the end of the hallway, peering through a vent that looked down into the service tunnels below. Nothing moved yet, but she could feel the tension in the air like static before a lightning strike. She turned back to Cole and asked, "What if they don't believe you?" He smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Then we improvise again." The radio crackled. Then the same voice came back, different, this time sharper, more awake. "Cole, is that really you?" he said. "It is." The voice cursed, then said, "You died 3 months ago." Cole replied, "Not quite, the fire got everyone else." The reply came fast. "Where are you?" Cole said. "Off-grid, wounded, compromised, need evac with one asset high priority." And Claire realized that meant her. She was the asset, and her life had just been rewritten into a file somewhere marked, "Need to know." The voice on the other end said, "Extraction in 10-hold position and kill the signal." Cole clicked the device once, then crushed it under his boot, the pieces scattering across the floor. Claire flinched. "Why did you do that?" he said. "Because now they are coming, and so are the others. We don't want listening." She felt the weight of it now, the full scale of what she had stepped into. This wasn't about a wound or a stranger, or even a cover-up. This was war behind walls. A war fought in shadows and sealed behind doors that never opened. "To the public," she whispered. "Are they coming for me too?" And he said, "Yes, but not for what you did, for what you now know." She sank down beside him, pulled a bandage from the kit, checked his wound again. The stitches were holding but barely, and if help did not arrive soon, he would fade right there in front of her. She refused to let that happen, not after everything. Not after the silence that followed his first call. Not after the voice that remembered his name. As if it had been spoken from the grave, she whispered. "How do you know they are still the good guys?" And he looked at her and said, "I don't, but they are the only ones who did not try to bury me." Claire nodded slowly, then pulled her phone, turned it off, broke the SIM and battery, and threw it down the chute behind them. She would not be tracked again. Not tonight. Not by them outside. Something creaked metal against metal, then silence. She stood watching the door heart thudding with every passing second, and in the distance above. Them faint, but growing louder, came the sound of blades cutting air fast, low, coming in hot. The sound grew louder with every heartbeat, a deep slicing roar vibrating through the walls and floor like a storm made of steel. Claire stood frozen, staring up at the ceiling, imagining the rotor blades of a military bird tearing through the night. Sky just low enough to rattle the bones of the building. She turned to Cole, his head tilted, listening, his hand resting on the wound like he was daring it to stop bleeding until this was over. He said, "They're here, and if they aren't ours, we run," Claire nodded. Not because she was ready, but because there was no such thing as ready anymore. She helped him up again, his weight dragging against her frame every step, a challenge, every breath a countdown to whatever came next. They moved out of the hallway, through a rusted exit hatch that opened into a tunnel leading beneath the old parking structure. The wind outside was cold and sharp and smelled like oil and concrete, and something burning far away. Claire tightened her coat around Cole, guiding him through the shadows. The helicopter wasn't landing, yet it was circling, searching, watching. Claire felt the eyes in the dark. Even if she couldn't see them, then a voice from the far end of the tunnel shouted, "Freeze," and lights snapped on, cutting. Through the darkness, 3 silhouettes appeared backlit. Tall, armored, and armed, Claire stepped in front of Cole, her arms up, her voice firm. "We are not hostile. We called for evac." The soldiers did not move, their weapons raised. Then one of them spoke. A woman. Claire recognized the voice from the radio. "Identify the asset," Cole said. "Nurse Claire Alden, civilian non-combatant." The woman lowered her weapon, stepped closer, eyes scanning both of them with the speed of someone trained to assess threats. In half a second, she looked at Claire, then at Cole and said, "You look worse than your file said." Cole smiled, barely alive enough to speak its. "An old file," she nodded to the others and said, "Move. We only have a window of 3 minutes before their drones reroute." Claire followed as they led them to the far side of the structure. A black vehicle waiting, doors open. Engine humming inside. Was darkness and safety and questions they were not ready to ask. Claire helped Cole into the seat, then slid. In beside him, the doors shut, and the hum became silence. The vehicle moved fast away from the hospital, away from the life she had just left behind. The woman across from her pulled off her helmet, revealed a scar across her jaw and eyes that had seen too much, she said. "Name is Sergeant Hale. Your last friend if this goes wrong." Claire swallowed hard, then asked, "How wrong can it go?" Hale replied, "They burned a black site, Claire. They buried a unit of their own and sent ghost trackers after." Cole, "You're in it now. They won't stop until every file, every witness, every loose end is erased," Cole whispered. "Then we stop being ends and become problems." Hale smirked, but there was no humor behind it. "We are already problems, but first we get you patched up, and then we go to the source." Claire looked between them, unsure if she was supposed to feel safer or worse. Then she asked, "What is the source?" Hale said, "The name buried in that file. The one who signed the last kill order, the one who wasn't supposed to exist." Claire reached down, touched her boot where the folded document still hid, and asked, "So what happens when we find them?" Hale leaned forward and said, "We give them a choice, the truth or the consequences." Claire leaned back, her eyes heavy, her mind trying to keep up, her hands still shaking from everything she had done tonight. She had crossed a line, bled beside a man she had never met, thrown away everything she had ever known for a truth she still could not fully see, and yet, somewhere in the middle of that chaos, she had found something she did not expect, a reason to keep going. Not for herself, but for the man beside her who had been abandoned by the system he swore to serve, and for the others who might never make it home. Unless someone stood up and said enough. Claire closed her eyes for a second, felt the vehicle take a sharp turn, and in the distance behind them the hospital faded into smoke and memory. The safe house was buried deep beneath a condemned textile factory 30 miles outside the city. The kind of place even satellites forgot, covered in rust, mold, and silence. Sergeant Hale keyed in 5 separate codes, then scanned her retina twice, before the steel doors opened with a hiss, revealing a corridor lit in flickering red light. Claire stepped in first, her shoes echoing off concrete walls. She could feel the weight of it all, the secrets buried here. The things no one was meant to. No Cole followed. Slow his arm around her shoulder. His face pale, his breath shallow, but his eyes focused more alive than she had seen since the hospital. Hale said, "This way, we have a medic waiting." Claire looked at her surprised. "You said we couldn't." "Trust anyone?" Hale replied. "I trust 2 people in this world. One of them is me. The other is the man who taught me how to vanish. He's waiting." Claire helped Cole down the corridor past rooms sealed in steel, past cameras that moved without sound, past names scratched off walls like ghosts wiping their own fingerprints. Then a door opened, and inside was a man with silver hair and eyes like broken glass. "He stood slowly," said Cole. "You stubborn bastard thought you were Ash." Cole smiled barely, and said, "Missed you too. Harlan?" The man nodded, then turned to Claire with a slow, respectful glance. "You must be the nurse Claire Alden. You were either brave or reckless." She said both. He gave a dry chuckle, then gestured to the table, "Lay him down. I'll fix what I can." Cole collapsed onto the table. Harlan went to work, silent, fast, efficient the way someone moves when they have patched more wounds than they care to count. Hale pulled Claire aside into a corner where cameras couldn't see her face and said, "The file you're carrying, it contains more than coordinates, more than orders." "It has the signature of someone at the top," Claire asked. "Top of what Hale said. Top of the wrong tree. Someone who used to command Black Ops units. Someone who vanished from official records 15 years ago, but kept giving orders through a shadow chain. Someone who burned an entire facility just to hide one message." Claire reached into her boot, pulled out the folded document, unfolded it on a metal. Desk Hale scanned it fast, her fingers tracing lines, her eyes narrowing, then stopping dead. She whispered, "Son of a bitch." Claire leaned in what she said. "This isn't just about a rogue commander. This isn't about covering up a failed op. This was a targeted purge, and that name there at the bottom, General Merrick, the man who trained Cole, the man who led Firewatch until he disappeared." Hale turned slowly toward Claire and said, "He's not dead, he's running the whole show from the shadows." Claire felt her knees weaken. General Merrick was a ghost story. Soldiers whispered about in the field, a name mentioned only when missions went dark and friends didn't come home. Hale continued, "We thought he was taken out during the Siberian breach, but now we know he wasn't. He vanished because he had to. Not to escape justice, but to build something worse." Claire folded the document back up, her hands shaking. "How do we stop someone who doesn't exist?" Hale looked at her with a quiet, cold expression. "We become louder than their silence." Claire glanced at the room where Harlan was still stitching Cole, his hands moving like a surgeon in a war zone, then looked back at Hale and said, "What's the plan?" Hale said, "We leak it all, every log, every signature, every frequency. We burn their shadow with fire and let the world see the rot. But first we move. We can't stay here long." The moment Cole used that frequency, someone somewhere heard it. Claire asked, "How long before they come?" Hale said, "If they're good, we have a few hours. If they're desperate, we have less." Harlan stepped out, wiping his hands. "Cole's stable, but he won't be walking anytime soon." Claire stepped inside, saw him breathing easier but still weak. She sat beside him, took his hand, felt how cold it was, and whispered, "You're not alone in this, not anymore." He opened his eyes and said, "You should have walked away." Claire leaned closer and said, "Maybe, but I didn't, and now I'm here. So tell me what we do next." Cole smiled faintly. "Said we go to the source, we find Merrick, and we make him answer for everything." Claire stood slowly, her spine straight, her voice steady. "Then we'd better get moving because I don't think they're waiting for an invitation." Hale stepped into the room, rifle slung across her back. eyes sharp. Then let's bring the storm to their door. The convoy rolled at midnight, 3 blacked-out SUVs weaving through the hills under cover of clouds, their lights off their engines humming low like a pack of wolves on the prowl. Claire sat in the middle vehicle next to Hale, who held a tablet. Glowing faint green as encrypted maps scrolled by, showing dotted lines that pulsed red and vanished every 30 seconds. She tapped the glass, whispered, "They know we're moving." Claire leaned forward, eyes locked on the map. "Where are we going, Hale?" answered the last dead drop Cole used before the fire watch went dark. "If Merrick is still pulling strings, his eyes will be on it." Claire looked back toward the second vehicle where Cole lay strapped into a padded seat, unconscious again, but breathing. Steady, Harlan rode with him, his old hands still wrapped around a field pistol like the war never ended. Hale kept watching the screen, then swiped it shut. Whispered Brace and Claire barely had time to tighten her grip before the lead SUV jerked, right onto a side road paved in cracked stone barely wide enough for a single car. The tires groaned as the engines adjusted the world outside, thick with mist and ash and something else. Something Claire couldn't name, but it made her chest tighten, like a memory she hadn't lived yet. Hale pointed out the window. Set up there beyond the ridge is the old relay bunker, only one way. "In one way out?" Claire asked. "And if they're already there?" Hale looked at her and said, "Then we do what ghosts do and make them believe we're not here." The vehicles stopped near a broken fence overgrown with weeds. Hale climbed out first, scanning the tree line with practiced eyes, then waved Claire out. The air hit her like ice full of old metal and burned. Leaves they moved together through the brush, silent as breath, until they reached a rusted-out door set into the ground. Hale keyed in an old code, and it opened, slow grinding metal against metal, and the scent of dust and old secrets inside. The stairs dropped into blackness. Hale went first, rifle up, each step echoing like a warning. Claire followed, gripping her flashlight tight, every shadow alive, every corner waiting to speak. The bottom opened into a narrow hallway lined with old tech. Shattered screens, tangled wires, dust coating everything like a tomb. Hale led them through 2 chambers, then stopped at a steel door marked with numbers half scratched away. She whispered, "He used to call this the needle." Claire asked why. Hale said, "Because this is where the thread gets pulled." She tapped a hidden switch. The door opened with a hiss, and inside was a single terminal still running, its green glow faint but alive. Hale moved to it, pulled out a hard drive from her coat, plugged it in, and the screen lit up with words scrolling fast. She said, "If Merrick is watching old threads, he'll see this one now." Claire stepped beside her, read the lines, the code, the phrases, the call signs buried inside files pretending to be empty. Then, something on the screen blinked once, twice, then turned red. Hale whispered, "We're not alone." Claire felt it too. The shift in pressure, the way the walls felt closer, the buzz in the wires. She turned toward the hallway just as the faint sound of boots echoed against stone. Hale pulled her weapon and hissed, "Go now back through the access chute." She grabbed Claire's arm and yanked her toward a ladder hidden behind a steel panel. The boots grew louder, heavier. Then the first shot cracked. Through the corridor like thunder, Hale shoved Claire through the panel, then dove after her, sealing it just as bullets ripped through the wall. They slid down the chute, metal slicing their coats, the air rushing past, then hit the floor hard. Hale rolled up fast, bleeding from the shoulder, but moving. Claire groaned, stood up, her head spinning. She helped Hale to her feet, and they ran, following the backup lights embedded in the tunnel floor, until they reached a hatch that opened into a dried canal system. Harlan and Cole were already waiting. "Weapons raised," Harlan shouted. "They're coming fast." Hale panted, barely holding her weapon, and said, "Then we make this loud." She tossed Claire a small pack full of charges, gave quick directions, plant them at each tunnel mouth, 30 seconds each. Claire nodded, took off running, laying explosives like she had done it all her life. Harlan covered the rear. Cole slumped behind a wall, barely conscious, but still watching. Then Claire returned, hit the Detonator and the canal shook with fire and rock and steel. The entrances collapsed one by one, sealing the pursuers inside. At least for now, Hale dropped to one knee, gasping, then grinned barely and said, "That'll give us maybe 10 minutes, Claire." Looked at her and said, "Then we better make them count." Hale nodded and said time to go hunting. They moved fast through the upper canals, water long gone dried to dust and rust and broken bones. Claire kept one hand on Cole as he limped forward, supported between her and Harlan, whose age had not dulled the speed of his mind or the way he scanned. Every shadow, like it was ready to kill. Hale led them always 10 feet ahead. Silent, rifle-raised steps light as whispers the escape had bought them, time not safety, and they all knew it. The kind of silence that follows you when something bigger is behind you watching, waiting, choosing the moment to strike. They found an old hatch halfway up a slanted wall. Hale keyed it open, and they climbed inside into an old power relay station. The lights still pulsing faint red like a heartbeat barely. "Holding on." Claire set Cole down on a metal crate, checked the bandages, then looked at Hale. What now? Hale pulled a sat phone from her belt, dialed something, tapped the side twice, then whispered, "Call sign arc light. Requesting net for Ember." Claire watched. As the static cleared and a voice answered, deep-filtered male, old not in age but in experience, said, "Who speaks?" Hale replied, "Ghost." 2 eyes in the needle. The voice paused, then said, listening. Hale spoke fast. "Our thread pulled responses received. Contact attempted, but not confirmed. General is active. Name is burned." Claire caught the shift, the way the voice hesitated, then hardened. "Where the hell did you see that name?" Hale said. "Buried in the kill order layered through Black Frost protocol. 18 years old, signed twice with double-confirmed fingerprint and retinal match. Voice said that file should have been cold." Hale replied it woke up. Claire stepped forward, said, "Who is he really?" "General Merrick." The voice was quiet, then said he used to be the shield when Firewatch went dark. He disappeared and someone else kept moving the pieces. Someone who knew the codes. Someone who knew how to disappear. Hale cut in. "We believe he's at the old observatory in Devil's Spine. Last signal. Originated there, but he'll burn it if he knows we're coming." Claire asked, "Can we get there before he does?" The voice said, "Maybe, but you'll need help." Hale looked at Claire, then said, "We don't have time to ask for permission." The line went. Dead Hale crushed the sat phone under her boot and turned. "Let's move." Claire helped Cole up again. He whispered, "We're chasing ghosts." Hale replied, "No, we're chasing the man who gave the ghosts their names." They hiked out through a steel door, into a ridgeline overlooking the Devil's Spine, a rocky wasteland carved by wind and fire. Once a research outpost, now abandoned, the observatory sat like a black eye against the hills. Its dome shattered, its radar frozen like a dying star. The path down was narrow, sharp edges and loose gravel. Harlan moved ahead, scanning for movement. Claire kept her eyes on the dome, watching it for signs, for flickers, for anything. Then she saw it, a light, small, brief, like a signal from within. Hale saw it, too. Said someone's alive, or someone wants us to think they are? They moved in silence, boots crunching against bone-dry rock. No birds, no wind, just the sound of breath and boots and the pulse in their ears as they closed in. Claire felt the weight. In her chest, not fear, not panic, but the realization that everything led here, every secret, every step, every scream and order and buried name. She reached the outer wall, found a breach, and slipped inside the others behind her. The observatory was cold inside, filled with broken computers and shattered glass and old maps of skies that no longer mattered. Then a voice rang out, soft, metallic, not through speakers, but through memory. "Welcome back, Ghost." Too Hale froze. Claire looked at her. She whispered, "That's his voice, the one from the training days, the one who gave me my first field order." General Merrick Cole stirred, leaning against the wall, eyes dull but aware. "He said he's baiting us," Hale said. "Then we bite." They moved deeper. The corridor narrowing, the lights flickering. Claire could feel it now. The tension, the history, the truth pulling at them like gravity. Then they entered the core chamber, circular lined with data stacks, and in the center, a chair turned slowly revealing. A man with white hair and black uniform, clean, sharp, unmarked. He smiled, said, "I was wondering which of you would make it this far." Hale raised her rifle, said, "Don't move." He didn't flinch, just said, "I trained you better than that ghost. 2, you won't. Shoot me." Not before hearing the reason, Claire stepped forward, said, "You buried them all. You erased lives. You tried to erase him." She pointed at Cole. Merrick nodded. Not denial, not guilt, just cold logic, and said, "Sometimes the fire is necessary to purge the infection." Claire shook her head. "You called it infection." "They were people," Merrick said, "and now they are martyrs because of you." Hale whispered, "Wrong. They are the storm, and you're standing in its path." Merrick stood calmly in the center of the observatory chamber, as if he had summoned them not as threats but as guests. His hands relaxed, his voice smooth like a man delivering instructions, not facing justice. Claire felt every hair on her arms rise, every part of her body screaming to move, but she waited, eyes locked on his every twitch. Hale kept her weapon raised, though her arms were trembling, not from fear but rage, the kind that builds over years, the kind that doesn't shake, it burns. Cole shifted slightly. His voice barely a whisper, but it cut the silence like a blade. "You left us to burn." Merrick looked at him with something close to pity, said, "You were never supposed to survive that mission the moment you stepped off the grid. You became a variable I could not control." Claire stepped closer, the fury in her voice sharp. "You made decisions that cost lives, covered it up, erased anyone who asked questions, and now you think you can justify it all with strategy." He nodded slowly. "Sometimes yes, because war is not about truth, it is about control, and when control slips, the cost is chaos." Hale moved fast, one step forward, finger tight on the trigger, but Cole spoke again. "Not yet, he's stalling." Hale froze. "What?" Claire asked. "Why would he stall?" Then she saw it, not in the room, but in the wall beyond the cracked observatory glass. A glimmer of red lights blinking. Not on a console, but in the distance, circling like vultures. Hale muttered, "Drones incoming." He called them Claire, turned to Merrick, saw the glint in his eye, the one that said, "You're not walking away from this." He whispered, "You forced my hand, but even now I'm offering you a choice. Walk away. Leave the files, bury them with the dead, or stay and become ghosts." "Yourselves," Hale spat. "You already turned us into ghosts years ago, now we haunt you." Merrick raised one hand slowly and said, "Too late." Then the floor beneath them shook. Not an explosion. Not yet, but movement. The hum of machines activating underground. Harlan stepped into the room, rifle raised, and said, "We have maybe 5 minutes before they rain this place down like hellfire." Claire looked around fast, spotted the master terminal behind Merrick, the one likely holding his final commands. She moved. Before thinking, shoved him aside hard, sending him stumbling back as she ran to the terminal and pulled out the drive Hale had given her. She jammed it into the port. The screen lit up instantly with encrypted files streaming faster than her eyes. Could follow Hale covered her 6, scanning the entrance as Cole limped into position near the window, watching the sky, and Harlan moved to the inner door, placing charges as insurance. Claire typed fast, overriding security layers, bypassing firewalls. With instinct she didn't know she had. Maybe it was adrenaline. Maybe it was fate. Then the terminal opened, and the files poured in. Names, missions, buried sites, proof orders stamped with Merrick's print and retinal confirmation. Claire said, "It's all here," Cole whispered back. "Then send it." Hale said, "You sure?" Claire nodded, eyes burning. "This is the only way they know the truth. The world sees who gave the orders." Hale said, "Do it." She pressed the command. The files jumped from the drive into a secure satellite frequency rerouted through the ghost net. A system Hale had shown her days before the files were going public, and they all knew it. Merrick roared, lunged for her. But Hale stepped between them, her weapon up, too slow to fire, but not too slow to stop him with her elbow. She slammed him back into the chair. He gasped, but the drones had arrived. The red lights outside turned white-hot as targeting systems locked onto the observatory. Harlan shouted, "We're out of time, Claire!" Pulled the drive, ran for the exit. Cole right behind her. Hale threw Merrick to the floor, snapped a zip cord over his wrists, and dragged him with her as Harlan hit the first charge. The hallway behind them collapsed in flame and smoke they ran through. Fire through falling debris, through the roar of machines above as the observatory crumbled beneath the weight of the truth it had tried to hide. Claire stumbled, but Cole caught her, kept her moving. Hale led the way, Merrick dragging behind her his. Uniform scorched, his power gone. The sky lit up behind them as missiles screamed down, the final drone strike hitting the center dome, turning it into ash and silence and smoke. They made it to the ridge just as the last piece of the observatory vanished into fire. Hale dropped to her knees, breathing hard, looked at Claire and said, "You did it." Claire looked back, the glow of destruction warming her face. Then she said, "No, we all did. And the truth is, burning its way through the world right now."